In this lesson of IDS, we are going to cover Applique and the automatic applique settings. Now on screen, I do have a stitch area, and when I look at the stitch area, I envision that the stitches that I see right now are going to be fabric. So in order to turn this to Applique, I right-click on the area. When I right-click on the area, it does select it with the blue and white flashing lines that you can see here in our stitch view. If we go to the outline view, which is on the view toolbar, I left-click on outline view, you can see the shape that is going to be the fabric. Envision that the gray area is going to be the fabric. Now I can go to the stitch settings, which is up here at the top. I left-click on stitch settings, or I can also hit my space bar. In here I have the ability to choose the applique, and when I choose applique and press OK and then generate my stitches, you can see that it does automatic applique. On the left hand side of our screen, we can see that the stitch frame is broken up into three pieces. The three pieces are the placement stitch, the tack down stitch, and the cover stitch. The placement stitch is the stitch that goes down first. It is a running stitch that will show where to place the fabric to be appliqued. Once that stitches, the machine will see a color change. So you set your machine into stopping between each color change. Then the next stitch is the placement stitch. The tack down stitch. After you place your fabric down, you'll then put a stitch on top of it that will run around the perimeter that will tack down your fabric. After that, the machine will stop because it sees a color change, and then finally do the cover stitch, which is the wide satin stitch that you see here. That wide satin stitch will cover the edges of that material. Now to go into the settings of the applique, we will right click on the area so that it is selected, then go to our stitch settings. When we left click on the stitch settings, we'll go to the applique tab. I'll move the area object stitch properties box out of the way so that we can see if we change things how it changes on screen. The first stitch, which is the placement stitch, again it's that running stitch, and we have an offset of that running stitch at 0, meaning that it will put it at the blue and white flashing line you see here on screen. So it will do your placement running stitch right on that blue and white flashing line. The next one is your tack down stitch. With an offset of -1, we are working in millimeters, the running stitch will be inside this blue and white flashing line about 1 millimeter, and it will do a running stitch around that area. Then you have the cover stitch, which is the last one. Right now we are using a satin cover stitch, and with a satin cover stitch we can see that our offset is -2, so the line will start -2 millimeters inside that blue and white flashing line, and the width of that stitch is 4 millimeters. So if we start inside here 2 millimeters, and that line will go around 2 millimeters inside the blue and white flashing line, the width actually is determined on half of the line, meaning that it will go halfway on one side of the line and halfway on the other side of the line. So it's all going inside of this blue and white flashing line. Our line is at -2 millimeters, so on our line the stitches will go 2 millimeters inside the line and 2 millimeters outside the line. So let's say we change our offset to -1. With the width still being at 4, I hit apply, and you'll see about a millimeter outside here. So we still have the majority on the inside, because if it sits inside here -1 millimeters, it's going to go 2 millimeters on the inside and 2 millimeters on the outside, which 1 millimeter will be on the inside of the blue and white flashing line and 1 millimeter will be outside the blue and white flashing line. So depending on your offset will change where your cover stitch lies along with the width. The thing is that if we do an offset, let's say we do an offset at 0, but we leave our width at 2, actually let's have that offset at 1, which meaning it'll be positive, and have our width at 2, and then press OK and generate our stitches. You can see that it does not cover our tack down stitch because our tack down stitch is at -1. So we do need to make sure that these settings are complementary to each other, in that our stitching will cover on top of the tack down stitch and the placement stitch, and make sure our fabric will cover on top of the placement stitch. So with this selected, I will then go to my property settings. In the Applique tab, we'll change that offset back to 0, and we'll have our width at 3. So with that, and I'll hit apply, 1.5 millimeters of stitching is going on one side of the line, 1.5 is going on the other side of the line, the 0 point is the blue and white flashing line. So we do have to make sure that our offsets are going to work with the cover stitch and the width of the cover stitch. We can also use an underlay on the cover stitch just by check marking this, and you can choose what underlay you want in the underlay tab. Another option is to use a blanket stitch as a cover stitch. A blanket stitch is kind of like an E-stitch, and in here you can go into your blanket stitch settings, and with the satin stitch you can go into your satin stitch settings. We'll press OK, and then we'll regenerate our stitches, and now you can see that my placement tack down and cover all work with each other. The next thing that we will cover in Applique is how we can create Applique manually. This is an automatic Applique, so this is all together as one in one frame. If we want a little bit more control, we can manually create our Applique. So let's change this back to an auto judge. We'll go back to our stitch settings, scroll over, choose auto judge, and press OK. We'll then generate our stitches, so we're back to square one. Now we are going to use the outline of this shape for our placement, tack down, and cover stitches. With the area right-click selected, it is now selected with the blue and white flashing line. And let's change the color so we can see that a little bit better. There's our blue and white flashing line. Now I need to make 3 lines for this applique, one for placement, one for tack down, and one for cover stitch. So inside the area, I will right click and select Create Outline from Area Edges. With that, I have the ability to choose what type of border. We'll choose a run. We have the ability to apply it on the outside border only, inside border only, or all borders. This object does not have an inside border, meaning like a hole, so I'll just leave it on outside border. With the outline offset, I will highlight that offset and we will change it to a -1 millimeter, so it will sit inside that blue and white flashing line 1 millimeter. I'll press OK, and before I generate my stitches, the program actually defaults to the same color you're working on for your outline. I will change the color. It doesn't matter what color to change it to, just a different color. Press OK, and it now puts that 1 millimeter offset line inside the area. We will then need to create a tack down. So right click inside the orange area, right click again, say Create an Outline from Area Edges. Again, I just only need it on the outside border. I do not have an inside border. We'll also create a run, and let's have that offset be about a -1.5 millimeters. We'll press OK. Now we also need to make this a different color, so we'll go ahead and change the color. Let's change it to a red. Press OK, and now I have another running stitch that is slightly inside of the placement stitch. So with the last outline, we're going to right click on the area. We want to make sure that the cover stitch, which is the last outline, will cover the 2 interior stitches, the placement and the tack down. So with this area selected, we will right click and say Create Outline from Area Edges. For the cover stitch, I do want it to be a satin border, and again, just outside border. With the offset, let's go ahead and offset that a little bit negative, which is negative 0.5 millimeters. And we have to make sure that width is going to cover over on top of our placement and tack down, with the negative offset that we have selected. Now our innermost offset, which is that tack down stitch, is negative 1.5 millimeters. With that being negative 1.5 millimeters and our current offset at negative 0.5 millimeters, we need to have the width equal to at least a 2 millimeter setting. And the reason is because at negative 0.5 the line will sit right inside there, and then with 2 millimeter wide setting it will go 1 millimeter on one side of the line and 1 millimeter on the other side of the line. So let's make it a little bit larger than that. We'll make it a 2.5. We will then press OK. Now it's going to default to the same color we're working on. Let's change the color. Let's change it to a black, press OK, and right click off to the side. Now you can see that it will cover on top of those stitches. We still have the interior. We don't need the interior anymore, so we can right click on that interior and Control Delete. Now we have those three areas separated, and we have created the placement stitch, then the tack down stitch, and then the cover stitch. Now it is important that we have them as three different colors so that on our machine we can program the machine to stop whenever it sees a color change. Thanks for watching this video, and watch for other videos.